This is AgGrad Live,
We have all of the different segments within the cotton.
the show that explores what it's really like to work in the ag industry,
So making sure that we get policy and regulatory issues
straight from the people who live it every day.
Happy Wednesday, AgGrad Live. This is my favorite time of the week where I get to just sit down with somebody who's doing big things early in their career in the agriculture industry. We call it AgGrad Live because we record it here live on Facebook, but it also becomes a YouTube video and a podcast called AgGrad Live. So if you only are catching pieces of this or you want to go back and watch any of the others, you can do that on our YouTube channel or via podcast. But like I say, I love this time because it's my chance to sit down and sort of pick the brain of someone who's already earning and achieving big things in the agriculture industry before their 30th birthday. It's our AgGrad 30 Under 30 program, and this is a real treat. We have on the show today, Ethan Smith. Ethan, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me today, Tim.
Ethan, you are a farm and ranch manager with Farmers National Company. Tell us a little bit, just what does that mean, I guess, first of all?
Start with Farmers National Company. Farmers National is a nationwide land management company, specializing in farm and ranch management, but also doing real estate sales, appraisals, timber management, oil and gas management. So it's a very diverse group. Call it the full landowner services company, the full laundry list of services that we can provide to absentee owners and other landowners. My role is more on the ranch side. So we act as the general manager, in effect, on ranches, operating ranches where the families own the cattle and the land. So they are operating their ongoing operations that will have foremen or laborers on site that work with us, and we act as the liaison for the ownership. Most of these are multi-generational families. As land gets passed down, we get more and more generations involved and more away from the premise of the land and the cattle, from nutrition to herd management to everything else. So I get to work with landowners and work with people in the field.
So what's that look like day to day for you as far as management? You've got people that are actually in the field, and then you've got people who own it. You know, what role are you playing there in between them day to day?
We like to say that we take the work away from landowners. So we do everything from paying real estate taxes to making management decisions, from grazing management, herd rotations, sire selection, and the same thing on the crop side. We'll work with farmers to do genetic selection for seed varieties, kind of planning programs throughout the year, updating with harvest and fertilizer records. And then what we do is we take that back to the client in quarterly, monthly, weekly reports sometimes to some of our clients.
Okay. And so how, and this is probably varying to a degree, how involved do the landowners want to be? Do they're like, hey, I pay you for this, just like take care of it? Or are they like, well, what about this variety, or what about, this bull is looking pretty good? How involved they want to be usually in this arrangement?
It really depends on the landowner. We've got some that want to be involved from seed selection or crop planning even, or from, like you mentioned, sire selection to grazing management. Some are involved day to day or even weekly, and some would prefer us to handle all of the operations. Either they're not educated in the ag field, the ranching, farming field, and they trust us, or it could be multiple generations of families, and there may be one part of the family that's involved and one part that's not. It just kind of depends. And this goes along the same lines too for trust properties with beneficiaries and trust officers, kind of get into that fiduciary management side. We've got some that want to be involved, and that's one thing we like too. We like to have landowners involved. We like to have people questioning or making those decisions. Obviously, we're there to help them along the way, but it's their property. It's their enjoyment. We're just helping with that.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. How often are you able to get out and visit some of the properties that you help manage, or is most of your work just done over the phone?
We try to get to our properties at least once a month, kind of depending on location. My quote unquote territory is pretty spread out from the southern tip of Texas out to New Mexico into the western panhandle, into Oklahoma even. So obviously we get a lot of road time, but we try to hit each property every month, especially if there's an ongoing project like cattle working times, doing conservation projects, some of those things.
And what's your background? It's a unique role to be in, because you've kind of got to know both sides. You got to know sort of what's going to fulfill the needs of the client, which could be an investor, could be someone who's inherited the property, could be any sort of person. But you also have to know how to manage farms. So you have to kind of know, probably I would guess, the roles that the foremen are taking and the people doing the work day to day. What sort of brought you to that sort of skill set?
Well, I grew up on a diversified operation in western Nebraska, southwestern Nebraska, Eustis, give a little shout out. I grew up with cattle and farmlands with my dad and grandpa, uncle, and now my brother's back home. So I had the production side. I had that day-to-day labor side. My dad could probably tell you I wasn't the best at fixing fence. I was good about talking about it, but not necessarily doing it. So that's where I got into the production side. And I guess through college at the University of Nebraska, I got introduced to the farm management spectrum. My uncle in Northwest Iowa was actually a farm manager, and I had no clue what he did. So it was later on that I fully kind of understood and grasped the aspect of that side of production. And for me, it was my way to still be involved in production and still be involved in farming life, ranching life, day-to-day operations. But the landowner aspect side came later, and I'm still fully grasping that. Acting as a fiduciary for clients is one of those mindsets that you have to kind of switch back and forth. You go from the production and talking bull selection to we need to do this for taxation purposes. We need to be mindful of all the business and banking side of it too. That's the part that my transition from Nebraska to Texas has given me. It gave me a little more of that fiduciary business side of the farm and ranch management.
All right, we're getting high praise in the comments for the Eustis promo. So we've got
my mother.
Nice Eustis promo. She likes the representing where you're from, your roots. So was it your uncle that you finally realized, oh, he might have an interesting job, I think I'll pursue that? Or where did you first hear about this opportunity? Because I think that's what one time that gets overlooked is, like, we talk about the success you've had, and it seems like it just kind of like happened on its own, which isn't very actionable, who's somebody who wants to maybe get into this work. So how did that part happen for you?
By the way, that's my mom. Thank you, mother. Actually, I think it was in college. I applied for a scholarship through the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, the Nebraska chapter. They were giving away scholarships to sophomores and juniors at the University of Nebraska, and I applied. And at this point in time, I'd gained a little bit of knowledge from the management aspect and understood the need for management with absentee landowners and transfer of wealth, transfer of land. And so that kind of piqued my interest, and I got involved with them and just started asking questions. I am one of those that can't sit still. So I'm always chasing something. And I think through the ASFMRA, that kind of really piqued my knowledge. And then coming into Farmers National Company, they were nice enough to give me an internship and start an internship program my senior year of college. So I started there, and it's kind of been Farmers National Company since graduation.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that can't be overstated. The internship thing, we just can't talk about it enough. How it's such a unique opportunity as a college student to get a low risk exposure to a company, and for them to get exposure to you that you may never get that opportunity again. I actually just tweeted yesterday that, talking to someone who's going out on their internship, I'm so jealous that I can't just try a new career every summer, because I think that would be really fun. What skills do you use that most people wouldn't think of with a professional farm manager? I mean, what came to mind when you were talking earlier about reports is, like, you probably have to write quite a bit, or I don't know if those reports happen in PowerPoint or how that works. But is that a skill that you weren't expecting to have to use, or what other skills would people not expect in this job?
I think the premise of the job is communication. So communication is probably the number one skill. Acting as the landowner liaison, you have to communicate both sides. Definitely writing. We, growing up, did a lot of writing, some speech presentations, just working into those leadership roles, I guess. And I think it's kind of a term that's got a little bit of a black eye, but a jack of all trades, or a diverse in all, master of none kind of deal. And that's one thing that has really played a hand, because you can be talking grass species to fertilizer rates to, gestation periods and health protocol all in the same hour. So being able to maybe admit that you're not the smartest one in the room on everything, but understand that you have to know a little bit about everything.
Have you ever had it where you're put on a project or property? I don't know the right terminology, but where you're like, boy, I grew up around cattle and row crops. I don't know anything about pecans or poultry or whatever the case may be. I mean, has there been anything like that for you? I don't know how much you can share on that.
I managed a property in South Texas that had onions on it, and those vegetable crops. So that's like being thrown to the fire, trying to understand vegetable crops and leasing shares and whatnot from there. There's definitely times you get thrown into a situation, but that's when it comes back to communication. If you know, or your network of people, if you know or can meet people that can help you and just are honest about the fact that I know nothing, or I know a little bit, I'd like to learn more, that not sitting still and wanting to learn more, I think are those ambitious attributes that you need to have early in a career.
Yeah, I think so. I think curiosity is an underrated skill. In fact, I tell people that, if I'm facilitating them going in for an interview, is like, a live interview, what they're wanting to know is like, how interested in this job are you? And so you have to kind of show, genuine curiosity. And I think that's just an underrated job skill in general. It's, how curious are you? Now, so for you, learning onions or whatever the case may be, you said you kind of utilize your network. So what would that look like? You would just kind of give them a call and just say, hey, tell me what talk to me like I'm 5 about growing onions, or, how would that look?
Yeah, a call, an email. The extension services in every state are a great tool. Regardless of where you're at, there's typically you can get in contact with an extension agent from one of the programs, one of the states. They're a good source. We do a lot with leasing, but with such a diverse area of Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, we may not be well versed in that area. And so we've got to do what we can to, it's a what you know, not who you know game. That's another one of those thrown out cliches, but it's true. And you have to be honest about asking questions and hopefully they'll understand your interest. Right.
Yeah. You don't have to have the answers, but you just need to know, where to find them for sure. So how does the structure normally work in terms of does the landowner just cash renting most of this, or is there any sort of like a revenue share based on the annual production, or, what's that arrangement, or does that run the gamut as well?
It does. One of my favorite words is it depends. So in the Midwest, there's multiple different leasing arrangements, really, from custom to net share to crop share to cash rent. Same thing goes somewhat in the Southwest region. You can run cattle on the gain. You can run them by the day. It really depends on what you can come to an agreement with. And a lot of it is working the numbers to see for both ends that it works. It's profitable for both, or what you could get for cash rent, you're getting out of a share depending on production, and vice versa. So it depends on the area, but more of it's just coming to an amicable decision with that, either that lessee or that landowner, to say, hey, I understand crop income's down. We'll try to get the best we can, but we're working with tenants to figure out the best place where we can still operate. Because the worst thing for any landowner is to have vacant land, no income.
Right.
So that's what we try to avoid, but it really depends. And I mentioned this, I don't know if it was earlier, but to you, the the craziest thing or the best thing about my job is there's so many diverse landscapes. Every 50 miles you can hit a different, soil type to culture to farming practices, ranching practices. So everybody's got their little area, but to understand that there's an area outside of that is very important. What may work in western Nebraska does not work in northwestern Nebraska. It may be just a 50-mile difference in radius, but not only just soil types, but practices may be different too. So understanding that along with the communication or the agreements you can come to with landowners and tenants, that's a big role or a big play in this farm and ranch management scheme.
So are you involved in those negotiations between operators and landowners?
Yes. As the liaison for the landowner, we're representing them as the manager. So we either set or agree to prices and come to agreements with those tenants.
And how does, if at all, does sustainability factor into this? Because on one side, you've got somebody who's trying to maximize their income by renting the land. On the other hand, I'm sure the landowner, they want that asset to be in prime condition permanently. And so how do you sort of balance the sustainability interests of both parties?
I think regardless of who it is, the main goal of that asset or that land is to preserve it and run it sustainably. You're not going to get the highest yielding crop if you plant at a higher density or don't control your runoff or are careless with fertilizer application or careless with overgrazing. All of those things. I think farmers and ranchers are the best stewards for sustainability in agriculture and in the U.S. world, quite honestly, because their best interests are preserving that asset. And usually the largest asset is that land.
And is it part of your job, or maybe you have a team there at Farmers National Company that kind of analyzes different markets to answer the question, like, what should we produce?
A lot of that's area specific too. If lower rainfall areas, obviously moisture is king when it comes to crop production and forage production too. But if you're in an area where or a climate or an ecosystem where corn doesn't work, let's go to cotton or those things. And that's one of those ideas that your area will kind of drive you to. I think Noble Foundation says it best. It doesn't matter where your farm is or if you're doing a 50-50 grazing where you take half, leave half method. It's all going to depend on your area and your ranch. You can run it like your neighbor, but it's not the same property.
Right. And maybe you've touched on this already indirectly, but what have you found to be the most challenging aspect of being successful in this job?
We all go through challenges. As on a personal level, time management with such a jack of all trades mindset, you've got to manage your time and make sure you're investing time in your clients. Because they're concerned. It's their asset. It's their heartstring asset that you're working with. Their grandfather farmed it. Their family homesteaded there. You're preserving that asset for them. And I think the managing that wisely helps. Just trying to make sure that they're informed, they're understanding of what's going on. If they've got expenses, they better know how it's coming out of their account. So that's probably one of the challenges. The other is maybe the one good thing that I talked about is the diversity of the landscape, the travel. It's hard to be in all places at once. And
right.
So we've got a team in Fort Worth and Farmers National Company all together that we can ask for help. We can ask for assistance. Prideful, production rancher, male, macho man would not ask for help, but it's one of those things that you have to do.
Did you find that, especially when you first started, where they are entrusting you with probably their number one asset? When you first started, did you think, oh no, are they going to really trust me with this because I'm so early in my career, or has that ever been an issue for you?
Yeah, I think more of that is the tenants' trust. I think the landowners, come to us as the professionals and yeah, I may be younger than the others, but I'm going to work harder on your land. I think the opposite side of that was more in effect the tenants, the lessees, trying to get them to understand where you're coming from. They know they're leasing from somebody else, but they may not understand the management side of it. So it's, again, communication is there. I feel like I'm fairly easy to talk to, so that's been a good thing, and that's from all of the activities that I've done through the years. I'll kind of segue into another realm, but getting involved even before college, in just meeting new people, that makes it a lot easier to get into a boardroom in a bank.
You and I might share one challenge, which is in recruiting, which is what I do. Sometimes, a candidate will say, well, if you just let me talk to the hiring manager, I promise we'll get this worked out. Kind of like if you just weren't in the middle of this situation, we could get this cleared up. Do you ever run into that also in farm management, or is that unique to just recruiting, or maybe unique to just me? I don't know.
No, you definitely run into that. I mean, people, it's not really going around your back, but they feel like they could handle it. They could handle what you're doing. Maybe they don't want to have another middleman in between, or maybe they had a relationship with that landowner before, and you come in and you're just trying to keep that marriage. So if you're easier to contact than that landowner, or you can make decisions, they'll begin to trust you.
Sure. That makes sense. You mentioned earlier kind of some experiences you had that sort of put you in this position where you could talk to a lot of different types of people. Let's give some shout outs here. What types of early experiences did you have that have put you in this situation to be successful?
4-H and FFA were big. We had at Eustis Farnham, we had a good FFA program, and that was more in the competition side than the leadership roles. Obviously, we did parliamentary procedure, but we did a lot of CDEs that created a competition, that created an educational aspect. Those were good. And then moving into college, a couple things for me: the Nebraska Ag Youth Council. It's a group of people in Nebraska, funded by the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. They get juniors and seniors from across the state to a 1-week seminar in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so attending that for 2 years and then serving on the council and as head counselor really got me into, honestly, a more diverse ag realm to understand how much more there is out there. And then you get in front of sponsors, you get in front of speakers, you have to learn and make relationships. And a lot of those leadership development things through Nebraska Ag Youth Council, 4-H FFA, the College of Ag at Nebraska, Farmhouse Fraternity, all those leadership activities. And I think those that are successful maybe don't, I don't know, I don't want to say this wrong, but I wasn't a 4.0 student. I didn't ever try to be a 4.0 student. I pushed myself to meet people and to be involved. And I think you'll hear that. Obviously, there's definitely some very intelligent people that have made very successful careers. But I think the more activity you're in develops you as a person. And as long as that resume's padded with not a failing grade, you can get through. And I think that creates the interpersonal relationships and the ability to go talk, go interact. Those were definitely the building blocks to where I am now. And obviously you opened the session with the successes and everything else, and I'm still waiting on those, still working on those, but I feel like I'm slowly building.
Well, we like to think that AgGrad 30 under 30 is an honor, is a success in its own right. I want to ask you a little bit more about just absentee land ownership. It would seem to me like the fundamentals are in your favor, of just more people that own the land aren't necessarily living close enough to farm it or have a desire to farm it based on, the average age of the farmer and the people that are inheriting, et cetera. Is that true? Is there more and more demand for the role that you do out there?
I believe so. And, as coming from the production side as a farmer, you're focused on production, not necessarily on keeping this person happy or maintaining their asset as well as what you do. But, the average age of the farmer in the upper 60s, there's a lot of land out there that is held in 3 generations removed landowners. They're not involved. They don't have that interaction. Without a doubt, I think there's a future for farm and ranch management. You know, I think the statistic is 1/3 of families don't have a transition or a succession plan. So and the hard part of our job too is when you come into an inheritance or a trust, you've got multiple landowners, multiple relatives that may not get along, number one, or may be in different financial situations where they need the money or some want to hold the asset. You know, we can provide the process of making that work, or in essence mediating that. We don't pride ourselves on mediation or succession planning, but I think that's definitely a futuristic role for myself and for property management as a whole. As this land keeps transferring. As Farmers National Company, we've got all those statistics, but trying to understand that, you know, grandma and grandpa aren't going to be there forever. What are we going to do after? Are we going to keep this income stream? Or are we going to sell it? Tax burden is a big thing, you know, estate tax on top of capital gains tax. Those are big issues. So, and then a lot of people have a pride in production. They want to say that they have a farm. You know, they go to the coffee shop and talk about what their farmer's doing on their farm today, or what their rancher's doing. You know, we went out to work cattle, we shipped, we helped brand. You know, they have that tie or that urge to be involved. And I think as people get further and further away, they need a source of professional understanding, but also the fact that they want us to take care of the work so they can enjoy it. I think that's the biggest portion, and that's only going to increase.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And you've alluded to some of the things that you really enjoy about the job, especially like you getting to see kind of a wide, diverse range of operations. What's some area or skill set that you've had to really develop yourself from when you started there? You go, oh, wow, I really got to get better at this, you know, that's helped you from being in this role.
I would say the financial aspect, budgeting. You would think that handling somebody else's money would make the decision easier, but when you have to explain it 3 times, it gets a lot harder. And so an educated approach or philosophical approach to using that client's money or those assets for not only their betterment, but the betterment of the asset. I think that's one of the areas. So working through budgets with operators or with landowners themselves, trying to figure out, okay, is this a necessary cost for this season, or can we move it to the next one? That and I think understanding other people's enjoyment in land. I've always enjoyed land. I've always enjoyed production agriculture. The agricultural mindset. It's in my blood, multiple generations deep, and I hope will be in the future. But understanding how the doctor in the next town over, the optometrist owns this farm. He loves going out there and seeing that tree every day, because there used to be a tire swing on that tree. You know, and every time he comes to the property, or he could be 500 miles away or on a different continent, and they've got those ties to that land for the family aspect. And you know, from the investor side too, you know, they enjoy seeing that land. It's not, one of the adages here is you can't watch the sunset over a stock or bond portfolio. You can watch the sunset over your ranch or your farm. And so that's the heartstring asset that we get to deal with, and understanding that people from all walks of life have that same enjoyment.
That's really cool. Yeah, and the financial side totally makes sense, because if it's just me, it's like, no, I feel it in my gut, this is what I should do. But if I have 3 people asking me why, it gets a little bit more, you know, I really got to break down my logic and reasoning. What about the future for you? You know, as you look to the future of your career, you know, what gets you most excited, or what comes top of mind where you want to, what you want to accomplish from here?
There's a lot of opportunities out there, I think, with not only Farmers National Company, but in the land ownership and the land transfer realm. We're going to have, like I said, 1/3 of farms and ranches have a succession plan. What's going to happen with that other land? Are we going to find that operators are expanding their operations, and landowner number of landowners will decrease? What if they don't have the capital to do that as a farm or ranch goes? And so I think that transitional planning, that's maybe succession planning for lack of a better term. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a CPA, and I'm not a financial planner, but those assets don't have the heart strength that I mentioned, from business side, whatever. I think that Farmers National Company, companies like us, and people in the industry are going to have to understand that in order to transfer this land down, that the transfer of wealth that is so imminent, we need to understand how to do that while keeping families together, while keeping farming operations viable, farming and ranching operations viable. I think that transfer of land ownership is going to be a big thing in my future.
Thank you for joining AgGrad Live. Visit aggrad.com, that's AGGRAD, to join the community, create your profile, and learn more about careers in the agriculture industry.